Ninja black outfits. Let me guess the first image that pops into your head when I say ninja. The dark of night. Shadows running across rooftops. Assassins dressed head to toe in black with only their eyes showing. If that's what you think, you are dead wrong. Cinema sold you that version of the ninja. You think black makes them invisible at night. But think for a second. In the moonlight, deep black is actually darker than the environment. It makes your silhouette stand out sharply. Real ninjas didn't wear black. They chose the ultimate camouflage, being ordinary. They dressed as gardeners, monks, or peasants. Viking helmets. Close your eyes and picture a Viking. A massive, savage warrior emerging from the mist, wearing that famous horned helmet. You see this image in movies and art 1,000 times. It is the ultimate symbol of brutality. You probably think the horns were there to terrify the enemy. But the reality? It never happened. In actual combat, those horns would be a perfect handle for an opponent to grab and snap your neck. No intelligent warrior would sign their own death warrant like that. Those horns were actually just a costume prop invented by a 19th century opera designer for the stage. Bulls and red. You hear that wild roar in the arena. You watch the matador waving that cloth under the scorching sun. And you believe that what boils the blood in its veins and rolls its eyes back is that specific color. Red. But this is just an illusion. You believe it, but the reality is that the bull is colorblind. In his world, there is no red. It is not the color that enrages him. It's the waving of the cape. That's aggressive movement. Even if you were holding a pink towel, he would still attack. Cleopatra. You've surely heard of the legendary Queen Cleopatra. You likely picture her as a true daughter of the Egyptian soil. Pharaoh blood, dark skin, an exotic beauty. She is the very symbol of Egypt, right? But if you check the blood coursing through her veins, it wouldn't be Egyptian. She was Greek, a descendant of one of Alexander the Great's generals from the Ptolemaic dynasty. She was actually an outsider to the people she ruled. She was simply the first monarch of her line to actually learn their language. The 300 Spartans. Visualize that famous scene from the movie 300. A narrow pass, squeezed between the cliffs and the sea, with a massive Persian army approaching. Standing in their way are just 300 men, ripped, death-defying Spartans taking on an empire all by themselves. Cinema and pop culture have sold you this saga of solo heroism. But in that narrow pass, they weren't alone. Standing right beside them were thousands of other Greek warriors. Thespians, Thebans, totaling nearly 7,000 men. The Great Wall of China. You're an astronaut, miles away from Earth, looking down. On the blue planet, you see a single man-made line, the Great Wall of China. It's a symbol of human power, isn't it? So big, it's visible from the universe. Everyone believes this. It's in textbooks. It's in quizzes. But every astronaut who returns from space says the same thing. You can't see it. No matter how long the wall is, it's too narrow, and its color blends in perfectly with the soil, making it impossible for the human eye to pick it out from that distance. It's like looking out of an airplane window and trying to spot a single human hair on the ground. The Napoleon Complex. How do you picture Napoleon? That small, angry man with his hand tucked inside his coat, challenging the world, looking almost ridiculously short. History books and cartoons all whisper the same thing to you. He was tiny, and his desire to conquer the world was just to cover up this complex. But here is what you weren't told. He wasn't short. By the standards of his time, his height was completely normal, even above average. It was simply that French units of measurement differed from British ones, and the world turned this tiny mathematical difference into a massive lie. Gladiators. You can feel the scent of rusty iron filling your nose, the heat of the sand, and the terrifying roar of thousands of people wishing for death. Two warriors face off, and you know only one will make it out alive. Thumbs down and death. Hollywood has taught you this. Gladiator fights must always end in a fatality. But the reality is completely different. Gladiators weren't vagrants found on the streets. They were highly trained, well-fed, million-dollar investments. Killing them in every match would mean financial ruin for their owners. Most fights actually ended in surrender, not death. The Pyramid Builders. When you see an image of the pyramids, you can almost hear the crack of whips and see tens of thousands of naked bodies being crushed under the weight of massive stones. Hollywood and old textbooks have sold you this scene so effectively that you can't imagine it any other way. You believe that great things can only be built on suffering and blood. But the tombs beneath the desert speak a different language. They were not slaves. They were skilled artisans who earned a wage, were well fed, ate meat, and were respected in society. Newton's apple. Picture the scene. Young Isaac Newton is sitting beneath a tree, lost in thought. The world quiet around him. Then, a sudden movement. A red apple snaps off a branch, lands right on his head, and bam! In an instant, everything becomes clear. Gravity is discovered. But that is just a sweet fairy tale we've been told. In reality, the apple never hit his head. He simply watched an apple fall to the ground while looking out a window. Nero's fiddle. You feel the sting of choking smoke in your throat. The crackling of burning wood mixes with the screams of thousands as magnificent Rome turns into an inferno right before your eyes. And then you see a silhouette on a balcony. Emperor Nero, fiddle in hand, playing a mournful song against the backdrop of the city's destruction. It is the most famous scene of madness and apathy. You believe it because that's what we've been taught. But there are two huge problems with this scene. First, Nero wasn't even in Rome during the fire. He was miles away. Second, and most importantly, the fiddle hadn't been invented yet. The 30-year lifespan. When you think of the Middle Ages, the first thing that comes to mind is life was short. People only lived to be 30. You've heard this phrase a dozen times. You imagine a 30-year-old man back then is already old, hunched over and on death's door. It's as if time moved faster back then. But the numbers are just tricking you. That number is an average. And it wasn't pulled down because adults died young, but because so many babies died. If a person survived childhood, they lived to be 60, 70, or even 80, just like you. George Washington's teeth. You are staring at the portrait of the first U.S. president. Tight lips, a stern gaze. Since childhood, you've been told his teeth were made of wood. It creates an image of a simple, humble leader who was close to nature. Wooden teeth. It sounds harmless enough, doesn't it? But the truth is darker and far more disturbing. There was no wood in his mouth. Instead, there was ivory, gold, and most horrifying of all, other people's teeth. Real teeth, likely pulled from the mouths of the enslaved or the dead. When he spoke or ate, he was essentially using someone else's teeth.